Entrepreneurs make the world a better place. They solve big, complex problems. They innovate and solve solutions that no one's ever dreamed about. And in doing this, they boost local and national economies. Sometimes they even solve social issues. In this episode, we talk to the person who is leading the charge for entrepreneurs across Canada. What is she planning? What is she observing? Keep watching this episode of Techopia Live. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Kern from the Ottawa Business Journal. Welcome to another episode of Techopia Live. This is a regular podcast from OBJ that features executives from next generation technology companies. We want to shine a spotlight on the up and comers, and we also want to keep you updated on some of the established players and also people in the technology ecosystem, all with a goal of keeping the tech sector informed and connected. As always, we've got a great show lined up for you today. One of the central tenets of Techopia and, of course, Ottawa Business Journal is embracing and elevating entrepreneurs. We think entrepreneurs need more support and recognition, both in Ottawa, on a political level, on an advocacy level, on many different levels. And today's guest, I think, would really agree with me and is kind of following that same mission as we are here in OBJ. In fact, you might say her job is waving the flag of entrepreneurs across Canada. She is an OBJ Board of Trade 40 Under 40 recipient, also a Globe and Mail 2023 Changemaker, and most relevant to today's interview, she is the CEO of Startup Canada. Here is Kayla Isabelle. Hey, Kayla.
Hey, Michael. How's it going?
Good. I'm excited to talk to you and get an update on everything that's going on at Startup Canada. But maybe we can start, Kayla, but just getting you to introduce yourself a little bit in terms of your career and your job at Startup Canada.
You bet. My pleasure. So my current role is CEO of a national nonprofit called Startup Canada that we'll be chatting about throughout today's episode. Before that, my career started in consulting. So working with a number of different federal, provincial, some municipal governments, other nonprofits, private sector, lots of different folks doing strategic communications planning, change management, and providing a number of different advisory and management consulting practice sort of scope elements. After doing that for a number of years, I wanted to kind of shake the snow globe of my life a little bit, do something very different. So I decided to move to East Africa, and I moved to Tanzania to work with entrepreneurs in the tourism space. That was, something that I've been super passionate about since the very beginning. I love travel, and I had a feeling I would really enjoy working with entrepreneurs. Got connected to incredible safari tour operators and restaurateurs and folks who really embodied this kind of entrepreneurial hustle and were building businesses from nothing. And after working with some of those folks in 2019, I came back to Canada and got connected with my predecessor, leader of Startup Canada, and the rest is history.
I did not know that African journey part. That is quite fascinating. I don't think I spotted, maybe I missed it on your LinkedIn. But let me go out on a bit of a limb here, Kayla. So I think what you might have seen there too is entrepreneurship equating to social change, maybe?
100%. And a lot of entrepreneurship out of necessity. You see a very different sort of fabric of the entrepreneurship ecosystem, much less support, but entrepreneurs that are trying to really take lots of different ingredients and create businesses that are going to bring wealth and support back to their families.
What a unique experience. Congratulations.
It was fabulous. It was great.
Like seriously, it must have been life-changing.
It was. Yeah, throwing a couple rhinos and a couple elephants as well on some safari tours. It was pretty special.
I bet. Not your typical day in Ottawa, I guess.
No, definitely not.
Okay, so Startup Canada. I have these fond memories dating back about 11 years ago when Startup Canada burst onto the scene. And I do mean burst, like it seemed to have this energy and electricity, and it just started to create a community of entrepreneurs. Like people really rallied around Startup Canada. And specifically, what I remember is this cross-country tour. And I don't remember if it ended in Ottawa, but they had a big event in Ottawa. I think it was at Lansdowne, at Dow's Lake. But anyway, tell us about Startup Canada today, Kayla. That was back in 2012. Tell us about Startup Canada as it exists in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, it definitely started that energy, and we've seen so much of that when we reintroduced another cross Canada tour this year. That was sort of a dream to revisit, going back into communities, seeing what entrepreneurship was like in every nook and cranny of Canada. We didn't have quite as many tour stops as we did when we first started, because I think our team went to 30, 40, 50 plus locations. But now we are rooted in helping entrepreneurs navigate what is a very complicated and extensive community of support. We've never seen more incubators, more accelerators, mentorship programs, funders, private sector partners helping founders. There is a tremendous amount of support out there for early stage entrepreneurs and throughout the entrepreneurship journey. What we're seeing as the biggest challenge is actually accessing and understanding what's available in front of you. So our mandate is to help these early stage founders get connected to the right support organization, the right program, the right investor, financial institution, et cetera. And we do that through a number of free flagship programs. We support women. We support folks wanting to export and really put Canada on that global stage. And then we do lots of wraparound advocacy to make sure that the perspectives of those founders are heard at every level of government. As we inform policies, as we develop additional programs and make new investments or continue to make investments in entrepreneurship, how do we make sure that it's built by the demands and the needs of a very diverse entrepreneurship community across the country? So we make sure we provide that podium as well.
That's good. I want to pick up on at least two things that you mentioned there. And one just struck me as being very true. Startup Canada, really was kind of in the early days. It's not to suggest that entrepreneurship didn't exist before Startup Canada. That's not what I'm saying. But it was kind of that coalescing effect. When I think of how things have changed since then, I think you're right. I think universities have business schools, universities have incubators. We're seeing accelerators, like Invest Ottawa would have, more private sector organizations like LSpark helping people out, a diversity of government programs that can help depending on kind of who you are or what you're trying to achieve. So it is like this big complex world where many people are trying to help entrepreneurs, but that can probably be overwhelming, right, Kayla?
Exactly. And I even feel that myself. My day-to-day job is keeping track of who all of these folks are. And every day I learn of a new support organization. So how do we help entrepreneurs navigate those supports more efficiently so they can spend more time on their business, more time investing or finding investors and getting that investment into their companies, leveraging the right programs so they're not, Googling their way through programs that aren't actually the right fit because of industry, region, the type of business that they have. There's a tremendous amount of inefficiency and also quite a bit of redundancy, I would say, at this point as well, that it's complicated to navigate through that web. We're trying to solve that, obviously, within a huge community as well. Canada's massive. We deal with so many other complexities that smaller countries, across the EU, that I engage with regularly, that they don't have, the regional elements. They, can potentially drive from coast to coast to coast in a day. And we don't have that luxury as being such a massive country. What we do have is incredible diversity, and there's such strength in the different regions and what we see come out from an entrepreneurship perspective. But it is very complicated to try to convene and put all of that under one umbrella.
So the way you help entrepreneurs kind of navigate this maze is by creating, I should know the answer to this, a resource on your website or one-on-one counseling. How do you help solve that problem?
It's a little bit of everything, Michael. So we do that either through our specific flagship program. So if you're a women identifying founder, we have almost a stream called our Startup Women program. That will bring in, national players like the Forum or investors like Sandpiper Ventures and ensure that we're providing that direct access for women founders to that right support organization. We also do that through our in-person programming. So I've been traveling across the country with my team doing this in person, similar to the tour that you would have participated in way back when. And we picked 5 regions from Whitehorse, Halifax, Vancouver, Calgary, and we just ended in Brampton to do that in real time, bringing national folks, local players, some provincial folks as well, so that you can actually meet face to face. Because I think we were really craving that after the pandemic, and it definitely hits differently to meet some of those folks face to face.
Yeah, and you can learn about the entrepreneurs so much more by being present with them and just chatting to figure out what their challenge is. The other thing I wanted to come back to, and I do have this recollection from 2012 as well, is the advocacy. So, I think what I started recognizing from Startup Canada back in 2012 was this desire to make sure that entrepreneurial message was reaching, and I'll be specific in this case, Parliament Hill. So I remember that event. It may or may not still continue, but you really wanted to get in front of those federal leaders and make sure they understood the role of entrepreneurs, in our national economy.
And that, I think, that sentiment still stands. We don't do as much sort of large scale Startup Canada down the hill like programming that you might be familiar with. We found it more effective to have smaller group conversations, giving more time with the founder and, let's say, the Minister of Small Business or the Minister of Export Promotion, to make sure that they have some actual back and forth and a bit of a Q&A and a dialogue versus podium approaches, which, yes, have a place in a moment in time, but where's the accountability? Where can we actually say, you heard this perspective, what did that resonate with you? Was there a plan to potentially connect that or help, inform a new program or a new incentive based on hearing a lived experience from a founder? We're able to sort of make that messaging a little bit more clear. And what we're hoping to do next year as well is localize those conversations. So it's not just with federal government. It has to play at every single level of government. Yes, each level has, its specific jurisdiction and areas that they are actually going to be able to control and make changes in. But it's this entrepreneurial kind of energy and this overall sentiment when we look at the scaffolding of business. That is a responsibility that we all share as government, within private sector, within all of these various programs. There are almost these like essential ingredients that I see being missed, in addition to the nuance of I'm this particular type of business and I have fallen through the crack of XYZ program. So I'm not a lobbyist. I sort of engage in these conversations. We do have a lobbyist on our team who really, continues this advocacy work ongoing. But we also partner with formal entities that have an exclusive mandate for that advocacy. So, incredible boards of trade like the Ottawa Board of Trade in our city, folks like CFIB as well nationally. We ensure that we're partnering with other like-minded organizations to help spread the messaging when they have obviously more resources being associated with the advocacy piece.
It's very smart, right? You don't want to duplicate the efforts of others.
I think so too.
And it helps. I think it helps, when you're doing advocacy of, let's just say federal MPs, for them to get a unified message as opposed to three separate messages. It's more like we're all coming together. We're asking for this. Keep it simple.
Totally.
Yeah.
But the human side of it, right? We can often just see, names or signatures on letters and not feel the urgency or how this is going to make an impact in someone's actual life. Entrepreneurs are people, right? And sometimes we look at these mass policies or these mass programs or initiatives that are supporting such a massive community of Canadians that I think sometimes we lose that connection with this entrepreneur building this business in this town. And that human being deserves more than that sort of blanket approach.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. And sometimes they just need to hear that human story about, here's the way it's going and whether a program is addressing or not addressing a need. Kayla, I'm going to put our great discussion here on hold for just a second here. We want to pause to recognize the sponsor of this episode, Number Crunch. Number Crunch is an Ottawa-based firm that allows you to strategically outsource your financials, especially if you're a technology startup or scaling your business. Number Crunch services range from bookkeeping to payroll to full virtual CFO services, including fundraising preparation and cash flow forecasting. Led by Susan Richards and Craig Hung, Number Crunch is supported by an established team of financial professionals who have advised and supported hundreds of firms. Number Crunch's cost-effective subscription model affords you the right expertise for every stage of your business. Let Number Crunch help your company mitigate risk by ensuring proper accounting procedures are in place, providing you with strategic input and scaling along with your business. For a quote on outsourcing and accounting, please visit numbercrunch.ca. NumberCrunch, strength in numbers. And we're back with Kayla Isabelle, the CEO of Startup Canada. Trust me, Kayla, everyone needs help. If my experience is valid, entrepreneurs need help with numbers. So they should call. Yeah, they should call NumberCrunch. You don't get your numbers right, you don't have anything right. It's all just a pipe dream. But anyway, Kayla, let's get back to our conversation. I think one of the things that makes you interesting to our audience here today is not only the startup part of your organization's name, it's the Canada, it's the national approach. And I think it's really cool that you get to talk to entrepreneurs from coast to coast to coast. So I wanted to ask you, you have this this incredible outreach. You must make all these observations. So I'm curious for you to identify a trend in entrepreneurship that would make you concerned, and then to end on a more positive note, a trend in entrepreneurship that makes you more optimistic. But let's start with that concern. Give me a concern as it relates to entrepreneurship in Canada today.
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I see and what I feel across the country is also different than what I'm seeing in the news and what I see sort of written on paper. So I have a lot of feelings around sort of the status and the current state of entrepreneurship. One thing that concerns me greatly is seeing this decline in entrepreneurs. We recently celebrated Canada's Small Business Week, and there were some very staggering statistics talking about the number of entrepreneurs that were starting and new businesses that were starting 20 years ago versus today. And if 1 in 1,000 people were entrepreneurs, if 3 in 1,000 entrepreneurs were starting 10 years ago, we only have 1 in 1,000 entrepreneurs starting now. And this is according to BDC and some other folks being interviewed during Small Business Week talking about these trends. We saw a huge increase in the pandemic of new ventures starting as well, though. So we see this kind of ebb and flow and this turbulence across the entrepreneurship ecosystem. My concern is, as we see new companies start and struggle from the get-go with all of the variables that we all know very well: inflation, talent, economic uncertainty, global crises, at our door, left, right, and center. It's a really demanding time to be a founder, not just in the practical elements of what it takes to build a business, including cash and people, et cetera, but the heaviness and the weight of responsibility that you carry and the mental health impact of not only starting a new organization that you're leading, but also dealing with global, economic elements that you don't really have very much control over. There's a tremendous amount of pressure that comes with that. So that's sort of the doom and gloom side. We're seeing fewer founders and additional stresses on those founders. But on the flip side, we also see entrepreneurs really thrive in some of these moments. We've seen that, economic recession and recession after, that's where incredible innovation comes from. I caution being too positive in that space, because we need to hold space for the very hard reality of what being an entrepreneur in 2023 means. But we are seeing creativity and imagination and unbelievable innovation that is not only focusing on profit, but is really focusing on the world's most pressing challenges. We know entrepreneurs are going to have ambitious targets, lofty goals. They're going to have big, big, big ideas. And we see huge communities of folks across Canada wanting to be founders. We need to see that translate into them actually feeling equipped to start those businesses, to scale those businesses, to keep them in Canada, but sort of build that reputation globally, because Canada deserves that bigger podium. And not just looking at profit, but really looking at even for-profit social enterprises, folks that are focusing on local community challenges, massive global challenges like climate change and global unrest. Startups and entrepreneurs are the ones that are going to solve some of the world's most pressing challenges. And if we're not investing in that first layer, getting them to be equipped from day one, setting them up, getting incorporated, finding the right program, academic institution, partner, et cetera, we're going to see a huge ripple effect in Canada's place globally when it comes to new ventures beginning. So I'm confident we can get there with some strong leadership, great investments that we're seeing across multiple stakeholders. This is not just the government of Canada's responsibility. There are so many different stakeholders that need to be a part of this conversation, and support with bold action. But I'm confident that entrepreneurs have the ideas that are going to get us to where we need to go. So we've got some essential ingredients needed there.
Yeah. So well said, by the way. It's like you said that before. Joking. Yeah, I continue to have that thought, right? That many of our societal issues, our environmental issues, our economic issues, I feel can be solved by entrepreneurship. That's not to say there's not a role for government, but I do think that it is the disruption and innovation that's brought by entrepreneurs that can, lead us to a better place in society. I'm so tempted to dig into that, but maybe I'm going to frame the next in an Ottawa perspective, because our audience, of course, is an Ottawa one. So, we've been talking a lot in the city about the technology sector, and this show is obviously devoted to that sector, and wondering, how we can do an even better job at, scaling these companies, at putting Ottawa more on the map. So drawing from all this experience in seeing, entrepreneurial clusters in Vancouver and Toronto and Calgary and Halifax, any advice or any observation that you would make how Ottawa can do a better job at encouraging technology, entrepreneurship, and just establishing its sector?
Yeah, it's a question that I've been reflecting a lot about, obviously with my role with the Ottawa Board of Trade and in many conversations I've been even having with your team, Michael. And what I see across the country is a tremendous amount of pride. Each local ecosystem wants to be yelling from a bigger and bigger microphone saying, hey, look at these incredible startups that are not only starting up in our community, but they are staying, they are creating jobs, they're contributing to this incredible energy that is forming around a particular city or even town. We're seeing in municipalities as well, wanting to take some of that attention. What I see lacking in Ottawa is that big microphone. We are not telling the stories of the incredible ventures that are coming from Ottawa that have already scaled. We actually have some tremendous scale-ups and huge success stories. And we often defer to one or two examples. We need to diversify the number of businesses we're profiling from the Ottawa space, because it's not for lack of actual talent and of entrepreneurial sort of potential and lived sort of experience. We see entrepreneurs left, right, and center in Ottawa, but you don't correlate Ottawa with the brand of being a vibrant, entrepreneurship kind of ecosystem, like you might a Calgary or Montreal or, a Toronto for that matter. They're all going to have different flavors. And when you travel across the country, people aren't talking about Ottawa. That part frustrates me, that I see, great examples of founders coming from the obvious players, but even for myself, to pull out Ottawa names of various scale-ups and startups, they're fewer even in the back of my head that I can pull from. So I'm trying to get better being an advocate of Ottawa. We have a branding challenge, I think, in this city. We need to be speaking from a bigger microphone, championing the stories of more diverse businesses that are coming from the Ottawa ecosystem, sharing the concrete support that we have available here as well. I think we have fewer, not even traditional incubator accelerator programs, but the diversity and variety of entrepreneurship programs I see being a little bit more limited in Ottawa versus other cities I've traveled to. But again, we have these essential ingredients. Some of the hard part is already, in front of us and solved for. It's a communication, a branding, a celebratory energy, and that fueling itself, right? Once we have more of that energy, it builds and it, gets you excited and it makes you want to sort of celebrate the town that you're from. We see that in so many other cities, and I'm not feeling that sense of celebration and excitement, passion and pride in Ottawa as much as I think we could.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, certainly it's something we're trying to move that needle and tell us more stories and that type of stuff. I always think that Ottawa potentially as the seat of kind of federal power is kind of stuck in that, right? So we all exist in Ottawa in the shadow of the Peace Tower, as the analogy goes, and that might be something that we need to think about and try to burst out of that kind of being defined in those limited ways. But this kind of sense of Ottawa being a seat of government doesn't help us, I think, in national discussions necessarily.
Agreed. And I've seen the same, in going to, across the EU. I was recently in Brussels and they have the exact same challenge. Like it is parallel in other parts of the world, but I think Ottawa has the appetite and there's interest. I've never seen more folks engage with this conversation. How do we get Ottawa on the map? How do we, bring these stories to the forefront? There are so many different stakeholders who are committed and want to be a part of this conversation. We need to translate that initial energy into actual action to move the dial, because I don't think that's rippling across the country. We're sort of in this infancy of getting the water boiling. We need to see it really, heat up and spread that message wider.
Okay, good. Listen, before we wrap up, it's time for our Building a Better Working World segment, brought to you by EY.
So I am building a better working world by amplifying and telling the stories of Canada's unbelievably resilient, passionate, and brilliant entrepreneurs. We've got so many incredible stories of newcomers, of founders navigating extremely challenging circumstances. And in my role at Startup Canada, I get to give them a podium, give them a voice to tell a story that deserves to be told. So I'm incredibly proud of that.
All right, Kayla, that's great. I think we could easily agree that you're building a better working world by doing that, for sure.
Thanks, Michael.
Listen, we've run out of time. I'm sorry to say that, Kayla, but it was great getting to know you a little bit better. Great getting to hear more about Startup Canada and what's on your priority list. I want to wish you all the best of luck and rah, rah, rah to entrepreneurship across Canada for sure.
Agreed, Michael. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay. We'll see you soon, Kayla. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Before we wrap up, let's take a look at some of the other great companies that champion Techopia. Techopia is brought to you by many great sponsors, such as EY, building a better working world. Number Crunch, offering virtual CFO services for SaaS companies. Pearly Robertson Hill and McDougall, a leader in business and technology sector law. TD Bank, specialized programs for technology companies. The University of Ottawa Faculty of Engineering, creating the next generation of technical talent. Techopia is not only a podcast, we post new articles daily at obj.ca/Techopia. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and click the bell icon. All right. Yes, Techopia is all of those great things. And in addition to that, I want to point out that we launched a great magazine with our friends at EY earlier in the spring. It's called the Techopia EY Insights, and you can find the digital edition of that magazine at techopiaeyinsights.ca. And I want to emphasize that we're already planning for the 2024 session. So look out for that magazine coming out again in probably spring 2024. I want to thank you for watching and or listening. We hope Techopia is keeping you connected and informed. Let's keep building Ottawa's technology utopia. That is Techopia. See you soon. Bye-bye, everyone.